All right, welcome to Words of the Wise. Today's guest is Lieutenant Crigler. Lieutenant Crigler is a lieutenant for a police agency in Los Angeles County, and wellness is a huge part of her life and career. So I'm really excited to have her here with us today. Welcome to the show, Lieutenant Crigler. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Paige. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, we talked offline, and I think that your story is fascinating. I'm so excited to share it with listeners today. I want to kind of jump into a little bit of your background and, how you started in law enforcement and how long you've been on the job.
Okay. I've been with my agency for about 19 years, collectively, 17, going on 17 sworn. Um, as a kid growing up, I was an athlete, so I played a lot of team sports. That kept me out of trouble, but it also kept me away from a very dysfunctional household. So I did not grow up in a positive environment. It was very abusive. So I played sports to get out my aggression in a healthy way. So
Mhm.
soccer was my primary. I also played basketball. I played volleyball. I ran track. So those were my core four. By about 10 or 11, it was pretty common for law enforcement to be at my house. So at that point, there was an incident that happened where I had called the police, knew that I'd pay for it later.
Mhm.
But at the time, I just remember sitting under my basketball hoop in the driveway, and I was pretty upset because I was scared of what was going to happen. And um, he seemed old to me at the time because everybody is at 10 and 11, but he, looking back, was probably only a few years on. And he had knelt down on one knee and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "It's going to be okay."
Mhm.
And so I felt comforted in that moment. And it was probably at that point there was a shift in me that um, law enforcement had a special place in my heart. And I was still too young to think, oh, I want to be a police officer when I grow up. I just think that I was different from everybody else in my household, that I was born with a very distinct right versus wrong, and everybody else did not.
Mhm.
But I just was able to look around my environment and know that something was not right. And so as I progressed and got older, I was able to graduate high school at 16, so I could get out of my house to college up in the Bay Area at 17. I was 17 for a day. And that was really where I started to heal and to grow as a young adult and to really like figure out what I wanted to do in my life. And so I got my degree in psychology because I really wanted to discover why me? How did I turn out how I did? And my siblings turned out how they did in the same environment with the same genes. And so I was just fascinated about why people do what they do and why they think how they think. And at that point, I was pretty certain that I wanted to go into law enforcement, but I was looking at the FBI.
Mhm.
And so between summers, I think between either my sophomore or junior year, and senior year in college, I was working with two female recruiters and just kind of getting to know, what could be expected. So I was in communication with them. And both of them were like mid 30s, never married, no children. They had moved around a lot. One spoke about her experience of being told to move to Kansas, and she had 48 hours to pack up her things and move. And that was really eye-opening to me because I had moved 7 times by the time I was age 11. And so I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to
Right.
be told where to go. I needed stability in my life because I had never had it. And so I really wanted to plant my flag. And so I got my master's degree in criminal justice down here at Cal State Long Beach. And from there, I started local law enforcement career. I started part-time following the street sweeper, giving street sweeping tickets. Um, I found out very quickly people rather go to jail than get a parking ticket or have their car towed,
I'm
which is
sure.
interesting. And then as soon as I finished my thesis, I went to the police academy and I've been here ever since. So it's just, in a nutshell, Cliff's Notes version.
No, I love that. And first of all, thank you for sharing that part of you. I think that a lot of individuals in this profession can relate to coming from a broken household. I've had a lot of conversations like this in the past, and I can deeply relate to that as well because I also grew up experiencing domestic violence and, obviously not the same story. We all have different experiences in our lives. And when you were talking, I was just really admiring your courage to have the courage to call law enforcement and ask for help. Because when I was going through those things, I didn't have that courage. And I remember being in this position of like, do I call the cops on my dad? Or do I let someone potentially die? Like, what do you do? And when you're so young, being put in that position and having the courage to ask for help, I think is so admirable. And to also know that there are positive outlets, because I think so many people do choose escaping and numbing and kind of follow that path of destruction. And for you, it seemed like sports and fitness was that way of you being like, no, I have an option and I have healthy outlets that I can, choose instead. I also think that, and I want to ask this of you, how how much did that one person mean to you and because obviously it was their job to provide that comfort, but at that time to have someone who was of authority and someone who was there to help you to come down and give you that reassurance that it's going to be okay. How has that impacted the way that you know, present yourself or how you try to show up for your community?
That had a significant impact on me. I mean, obviously in the moment I was terrified. I mean, it's embarrassing to think back at that time of my life and realize, after being in this career for so long, like I was that house that
Mhm.
the officers went to and knew, like, oh, not again. We're going there again. And coming into this profession and feeling like, I was the only kid going through this and realizing that so many people in this profession have very similar backgrounds, even worse than
Mhm.
what I had. And so there's a bond there, a trauma bond. Um, I just look at that moment, and although I was terrified of what I knew the consequences would be, and I was correct in my assumption that I would pay for it dearly, and I did. In that moment, I was comforted, and I believed him when he said, it's going to be okay. And I believe he even said that I did the right thing by calling. Because I was crying, I was scared. I was 10 or 11, like I was a child still. And even though it was frequent that occurred, it was still that was the first time that I had called, and I called probably two or three more times over the years after that before I got out of the house. And it was different as I got older. That was the one that stuck out the most. But in choosing a profession in law enforcement, um, I wanted to be the voice of the voiceless. I wanted to be the calm in someone's storm because that's who he was for me. Even if it was brief, I had that. And so how I've been, I mean, it's different now because I'm an administrator, so I'm in the office and I don't get to go out in the field anymore unless it's really, really bad. Being on patrol as a newer officer, I was very relatable to children,
Mhm.
especially in domestic violence calls, especially with sexual abuse. That was like where I excelled as an officer because it was relatable to me. I had that understanding, I had that perspective, I had that compassion. And so that's really how I focused my efforts in policing was on the children and those types of crimes because those were like my way of healing. So when I was in detectives, I investigated all the crimes against violence. And, at a small agency, you wear a lot of hats. And so I had all the domestic violence, I had sexual abuse, I had, assault and battery, things like that. But my passion was with anything related to children, which is the more challenging cases, and a lot that make especially the male officers a lot more uncomfortable with the questions you have to ask, that are very explicit questions and very specific and detailed and graphic. And it makes everybody uncomfortable. But because of my own experiences, that helped me in my process realize that, something bad has happened, but it doesn't define you.
Mhm.
That you can make decisions as a grown up, that you can go down a different path, that you don't have to be a victim of that. You can overcome it and be an overcomer. But it's on you, the individual, to make that decision. And it's hard. And not everybody has the resources or is aware of the resources out there. I look back at times in my life and I think it's by way of miracle that I got here, that I really don't know how, other than I played sports, and that kept me in line. I had really good friends. I had really good parents of my friends that showed me what a normal household should look like. Normal,
Right.
but what the average household, a healthy household, would look like. So I had a lot of sleepovers elsewhere, and so I found ways to cope during that time. But I think my entire career has been, healing my younger self through helping others, would be the best way to describe it.
Yeah, and I also think that, it's so interesting because you said like it was, kind of embarrassing and, you felt that and I relate to that feeling of like you never wanted people to know the messy parts of yourself, right? And so, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but like I just always tried to present myself like I was okay and perfect and kind of hid all of that. But I think over time, when you have that past experience and you can bring that into your current life and career, in a positive way of like, this is my superpower, and it's
Mhm.
kind of become your superpower. Now you're able to help others in the way that you needed help and the way that you had received help as a small child. And that really is a superpower to be able to relate with people and, to have those experiences, even though like previously it didn't feel that way,
Right.
obviously. It
Yeah.
took like a long time to get there. I kind of skipped a whole journey of healing and processing, but I think it is so powerful to come out the other end and be like, yes, I've been through this, but it doesn't define me. And even more than that, it's helped me to, be my best in life and in my career and choose the best version of myself. I know that you said that your environment outside of your household, sports and, friends really influence that. And I know that you've taken a lot of, that fitness and sports and, things into your career. And how did that impact how you show up on your career or in your career? And how did that kind of stick with you through life?
So I'd say playing sports, especially as many as I did, with the overlap too, I was able to develop like really strong discipline early on. Like I was used to waking up early for practice, staying late for practice, doing doubles, having games on the weekends and tournaments, and so having to manage my time with homework. All those things, like having those habits early on, it just was normal every day, like exercise. That's just what I did. I didn't know anything different. So, going into the academy, I was in my early 20s, so still pretty young. I did have my college years and I did have the stereotypical freshman 15, maybe not 15, but maybe like the freshman five.
Mhm.
But like getting out of that, but it was really easy to get back into it and training to be prepared for the academy. And then obviously once in the academy, that's all you did is, you got to pay to get work out basically. It
Right.
was pretty cool. But I think that's really when I made the decision. By the time graduation came, which was about this time of the year, it's literally my anniversary month. Um, I just made a promise to myself, like, you feel so good in your Class A uniform and you've made it. You have no idea what you're about to get into with field training, and no one tells you that it's 10 times worse than the academy. But when you get to your graduation day, it's like, okay, I've made it this far, and it's an accomplishment to celebrate for sure. And you're feeling your best. You're in the best shape of your life. You're in your Class A uniform with your tie and your gloves and your shiny things that are all brand new. And I just made a promise to myself that I would never grow out of my uniform. And it was really that simple. That at that point, almost 20 years ago now, there was this stereotype: as you get older and older in this career, you get fat and you get out of shape and unhealthy. And it's really easy to do because of shift work and you're eating on the go and what's available is not healthy.
Mhm.
So it was hard, but I just made that promise early on that I was not going to fall into that trap, and I was going to maintain a level of fitness as best as I could given my shift schedule at the time. Around 2010, so that was 2007, around 2010, I started to pick up some bad habits, and I checked myself. And it was actually at Halloween, and I was eating a piece of candy at my desk, writing a police report, and I just felt suffocated in my uniform. And I looked down and I was like, oh my gosh, my uniform is too tight. And so I immediately, like, I put away the candy. And I went on like a strict, like, that was when clean eating was starting to become really popular. And so I basically joined a group of friends, and we helped each other like with a clean eating type challenge. And that ultimately led to me losing about 20 pounds over the course of like 4 to 6 months. And so it got me back to where my normal was at that point.
Mhm.
And I started picking up, more of an exercise routine and making that like a daily habit again. And so I did have that little glimpse of reality that I almost failed myself. But because I had that foundation as a kid with sports and athleticism, and I knew how it made me not only just look, but also feel, and my energy and things like that. When you get started, it's hard. When you're in the academy, it's still a 9 to 5. When you start shift work and it's 12 and a half hour shifts, it's daytime, it's nighttime, and training, you're bouncing around all over the place. When you're brand new, you get the worst pick, which is usually weekend nights, which I loved for my job. It was, the most exciting. You learn so much so fast. But it throws everything off in your personal life. And then, when you start to get married, if you have kids, which I do not, but I was previously married, and he did have 3 kids. And so I do understand what family balance is, and kids, and how that impacts your schedule and availability for things too. Um, so yeah, once I got to that point, I was able to, like, okay, what am I missing? What do I need to do to fix it? And then I was able to easily build those habits again. And that's led me to where I am today.
And can you walk me through what does that look like for you? Obviously, everyone's going to be different. And, we hear so often, I mean, there's some saying or statistic that says, like, first year on the job, you're going to gain 30 pounds. I
Oh,
think it's something like that. That's like
wow.
some sort of statistic. And so, what did that look like for you? Is it, you know, gym beforehand, cardio, clean eating combination? Like how did you craft your schedule with your shift work and how were you able to fit it in with family and personal life and work life? What did that look like for you?
It's evolved. I'm now in my early 40s, as a woman, and hormones and things like that. And so it's definitely not as easy as it
Mhm.
was early on. But I think regardless of age and gender, the biggest part of what you have to control is your food. And so I was just really good at meal prepping. I get super hangry. So
Same.
in patrol, I had snacks. I had a lot of snacks, but it was not the quantity, it was the quality. And so what I have focused on, and what like everybody needs to focus on, is protein intake.
Yep.
And hydration, like simple, like water and basic meal prepping. I am not a huge chef at all by any means, but I had easy things on the go, like meat sticks, hard-boiled eggs, um, like protein shakes were really easy on the go too.
Mhm.
And so I did my best to set myself up for success. Like if I had it, I'd eat it. If I didn't have it, I'd go through a drive-through. And
Yep.
so regardless of and obviously you could go hours without eating depending on what was going on. But if you had something readily and available in the car, trail mix, whatever, something that was better for you than an In-N-Out burger or, 99-cent tacos from Jack in the Box at midnight.
Mhm.
There was even some cereal in there at 7-Eleven at midnight. So just any of those things to avoid. If you control your food intake, I think that is like the biggest thing. And just drinking water and electrolytes. No sodas, no energy drinks. I didn't have any of that stuff. Coffee, of course, but I'm not a big creamer person either. And so like the calories are what's gonna get you,
Yep.
but also like the quality of food. And not everybody, likes fruits and vegetables and things like that. But if you prioritize your water and your protein, I'd say that's a really good start. Um, Beyond that, especially now, like I have a better routine because I'm on a 4-10 schedule, but even with a 12 and a half, if I worked day shift, I would work out right after I got off work. So I would go to the gym immediately before I went home because I knew that if I went home, I'd not go
Done.
back out.
Yep.
If I worked night shift, I would only sleep about 5 hours because I would just knock out as soon as I got home. But I'd wake up early because that was as much sleep as I needed then. If I sleep 5 hours now, that's not enough. But at that time, it was good quality sleep. And that was good enough for me. And I would work out before work and just get it done because by the time I got off shift at, 6 in the morning, I was exhausted and I just wanted to go home, shower, and sleep. So that's how I prioritize it on patrol now. I get up early before my shift. I wake up at 4:30. I go to the gym, and then we have a gym here at the station that I either run on the treadmill or I do an incline walk on the treadmill. So I do a HIIT workout at the gym, and then I just do a walk. I get my steps in basically at the gym here. And so people will see me come in. I'm still in my workout attire. They know, oh, the lieutenant's in the gym. Don't go in there, don't cut through to the locker room because we don't want to disturb her. Like that's just kind of like my routine every day. Um, the other thing that I prioritize now that you can't really in patrol, especially if you get called in for overtime or if you have to hold over or if you have a court subpoena and it's in the middle of your sleep if you work night shift. But now I can do a lot better about it. I prioritize my sleep. I
Hmm.
have found, especially, being an admin and the amount of stress that we have, I have way more stress now than I ever did in patrol. It's just a different kind.
Right.
But as you age and as women, your cortisol levels impacts weight gain and hunger and mood and all those things. And so I had worked with a dietitian for a little bit when I was training for a half Ironman a couple years back. And so I learned about the importance of sleep and how much my body truly needed. So I prioritize 7 hours of sleep every night, which is really hard, which means I get home and it is like dinner, shower, I start getting ready for the next day, and I'm in bed at like 8:30 at the latest.
Hmm.
And it's comical because I'm like old lady, but it doesn't matter because I know that I will get 7 to 7.5 hours of sleep and I will appreciate it much more the next day.
Right.
So food, exercise, sleep, those three things are like my routine and I prioritize them every single day. I don't always succeed, but the majority at this point, I think I have it down to a T.
I love it. And I'm shaking my head, yes, because you're saying protein and having snacks readily available. I 100% agree. And I think that a lot of people don't have the knowledge around nutrition that protein is not just for muscle building, but it's also for weight loss. It's
Right.
very important to have that protein. So I love that you said that. And I love the consistency that you have. And you make it sound, I don't want to say you make it sound easy, but you make it sound attainable because I think that there's so many reservations or so many comments of like, well, I don't have the time, or I'm working shift work, or I have a family, and you experience that too. And obviously it's challenging, but it's possible. And I think hearing from you and knowing that yes, it's hard, but you can do it and
Right.
it's important. What would you say? Because I know that, um, you come from a background of training. And so for you, that like consistency is something that you've been used to. What would you say to someone who doesn't have that background and doesn't have that routine and they're looking to get started? I've had so many conversations where, I think it's important to have like a deeper why behind what you're doing to get that motivation. And it sounds like you've always had that personal why. But beyond that, like like what words of advice would you have to someone who maybe has never been active or maybe did gain weight on the job and they don't have that routine yet?
That's a good question. And it's going to be a different answer, I think, for everybody. First, you have to find something that you like to do. Like, not everybody, like, I do a variety of workouts. I swim, I run, I cycle, I do HIIT workouts, which are, a combination of cardio and strength. Pickleball for fun every now and then, like whatever. I like to be active, but those are my, four main things, which is why I do triathlons because three of them are in there. But I think that whatever it is, for some people it's Pilates, for some people it is a HIIT workout, for some people they're really independent and they know what to do going to the gym. I think that's harder if you've never really had something or routine, but there's gyms that have 30-minute workouts, like boot camp style gyms, like Orange Theory or Fit Body Boot Camp, something like that. Try one of those out because those are like different workout every single day. You're with a group of people. It makes it more fun. And it's 30 minutes. It's quick and
Right.
easy and it's structured. You don't have to think about it. You just have to follow instructions, which are pretty easy for police to do. Um, some people like to do kickboxing. If they have a lot of aggression they need to get it out in the boxing ring. Do kickboxing, jujitsu, whatever it is. I think you should try out a number of things because if you're not going to like it, you're not going to stick with it. So I
100%.
think that you owe it to yourself to, if you're going to commit to something, especially long term, and be consistent with it, you need to find something that you enjoy doing. Exercise is hard no matter what. It should be. That's the whole point. But it should be fun too. It should be something that is enough exciting for you to get yourself out when it's dark, when it's cold, when it's raining, and you commit to doing it. Um, I think that for somebody who's just out of it to get back into it, start small. A lot of times people are like, okay, I'm going to do this, 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 and this, and it's just too much. Like it's like the elephant, you bite one
Yep.
bite at a time. So just pick a couple things, like especially when it comes to food, which is way harder for people than exercise, but you can't out exercise your plate ever. So by just removing the things that you shouldn't be eating or drinking or limiting it, that's a good start too. So I would just like make a list when it comes to food of, okay, I'm going to cut this out, cut that out, try this, try that, and just start small and then just continue building from there. It seems easy for me because I've been doing it for so long.
Right.
Like it's choose your heart. It's easy to not do any of those things and just go through the drive-through, but then you don't feel good about yourself. You don't feel good inside. You're not leading by example. And, you know, leading a team of people, I have to lead by example. So I put myself at a higher standard. Um, or you can do what I do and it becomes easy and just like everyday normal life. And you're healthy and you have a better, mental health, physical health, well-being, and people see, okay, like, she's been doing this for almost 20 years and she's still, can run many, many miles and I can still do pull-ups in my uniform. So it's not hard if you commit to it and you build that consistency and those easy habits, much like you build bad habits. It's the same thing. It's just what are you going to commit to? But I would say if you're going to start somewhere, start small and just keep
Yeah.
building on it.
I love that. Start somewhere, start small, build consistency over time, and it gets easier over time. I also love that you said choose your hard
Mhm.
because it is. I think, I talk about this a lot, but your mind always wants to choose the easy,
Mhm.
right? And so you have to train it to think in a different way. And, being sick is hard.
Mhm.
Being unhealthy is hard.
Mhm.
Working out is hard. Eating healthy is hard. So, like, choose your heart. I love that. I
Right.
think that's great. And that's great advice. Start somewhere. Small steps will lead to huge impact over time. So obviously you're in leadership and you said you lead by example as a part of leadership. How do you feel that that has impacted your agency and, building a culture of wellness within your agency? Do you find that, you know, it- do you, how do I want to word this question? I want to word it appropriately. Do you think that leadership should be doing that? That they should be this pillar of wellness so that they can set the example for everyone else within their agency?
Absolutely, 100%. In leadership for me personally, and I know, a lot of my mentors as well, and people in my cohort, is you never ask someone to do something you're not willing to do yourself. And what I love about this new generation, say what you will about Gen Z and, Gen Alpha right behind them,
Mhm.
have work-life balance down pat. Maybe a little too much. But compared to, my generation and the one before mine, it was all work, work, work. And now we see a generation of not work, work, work. And not only that, but they're more health conscious, I think. And so, when I started, it was, the senior guys, they were, big bellies drinking beer after shift. And now the kitchen refrigerator is full of people bringing their lunches. We have a lot of people who meal prep, who snack like me, but healthy, or they choose healthier options when they do eat out. Um, at a deli versus fast food, something like
Mhm.
that. And so I've seen this shift, which is great. But it's also good for the new generation to see leaders who have been around 20 to 30 years that they're still in workout clothes, that 2 days from now, when I go to a memorial run for a brand new recruit, I'm running with her in her class. No problem. Like people see that and that's lifetime fitness. That's what they're teaching in the academy. And we're leading that by example. And so being a woman in this job makes it even harder because we're picked apart. I mean, that's just reality. Getting into any profession where it's male dominant, you're in a fishbowl, and any little thing you do wrong is just blown up bigger and bigger because there's fewer of you and you don't blend in. And so that was my career mission is that's one thing I'm never going to be criticized for is my fitness. And that's the one thing that I can control. And they're going to criticize me for everything else. That's fine. That goes with the territory. But that was the one thing that I knew that I could control, that I could not be criticized for. And so I think it's important to lead that, to be that, and to also encourage it. And if you're not doing that yourself, it's hard to mentor somebody else to do because then you just look like a hypocrite that, like,
Right.
well, you're not doing that. Um, Everybody here knows my reputation. We had a potluck on Halloween and I participated. And, you hear comments of, oh, LT, we're so glad you're here. We didn't think you would eat any of this. And it's like, why? It's one day,
Mhm.
one bad day of food or one bad lunch where I splurge is not going to do anything wrong to me. Whereas someone who does the opposite and eats like that on the daily and has one healthy lunch, you're not going to see a difference from that one healthy meal. And so it's about balance. And so they know I'm human. I have a candy bowl on the corner of my desk where I'm sitting right here. It's how I lure people into my office, to say hi, but they steal candy. They know I don't eat it, but it's like I'm a human being, and it is about balance. But I think in leadership, it's so important. And the same goes for taking time off. When you have people who work for you and you yourself don't ever take a vacation, they're going to be less likely to take time off because they feel bad. Well, you don't take time off, so therefore I can't take time off. No, the city gives you time. My
Hmm.
city gives me lots of time, and on top of my standard vacation time, I get executive leave time every year that I have to use, just like the officers get personal time. That's, the distinct honor of being salary. So you have to take it, because if you're not taking time off and giving yourself a break, you're going to burn out yourself. Your
Hmm.
employees are going to burn out too. And so if we're going to shift this idea of work-life balance, you have to set the example of what that means. And when you're off work and on vacation, don't respond to your emails. Like, no, and make it clear in your auto reply that you are not available. When I went on vacation, I left the country. Like, do not call me. You're not going to see me. You're not going to get an email from me. Like, this is my time. I
Hmm.
need it. You'll appreciate it when I get back, that I've had this ability to recharge. And so, I've worked under bosses that would criticize you for taking your time off. And it's like, why? Like, we need it. And my thing is, people need the best of you, not the rest of you.
Oh,
And
I love
as an
that.
executive, it is a marathon, not a sprint. I've been in this position for 5 years. I still have almost 9 to go before I retire. 14 years in admin is a really long time. I promoted early, and that's the consequences of it. You have to pace yourself. And so for me to not look like the gray-haired president 4 years later, and I still, knock on wood, I don't have gray hair yet. Um, I just, you have to take care of yourself. There's no way you're going to be great at leading if you don't. If you're on like the back burner and you don't prioritize your own health and wellness, like something bad will happen. Like our heart attacks are high, our
Yep.
suicide rates are high. For me, being able to still retire at 50 in this new generation, at 57 in California, that's still relatively young compared to everybody else. But the reality is our bodies are not 50. They're not 57. We've taken a beating. And, we may look younger on the outside, but internally, we have a lot of things going on because of our stress and, high adrenaline calls and things like that, shift work, bad sleep that build up over time. It's cumulative. And so anything we can do early on in our career to either prevent those or prolong them, the better off we are. Because why work this hard to get to retirement for you to not be well enough to enjoy your retirement? And so if nobody out there has a why, or who doesn't have kids, because a lot of people have opted out of having kids at this point, especially women in law enforcement, because it's just even harder. But this generation, we're seeing they have dogs and not children. I'm one of
Mhm.
them. It's more and more common, but make your why for yourself at the very least, to be able to enjoy the retirement that you've worked so hard to earn. And so if you're not healthy now and taking care of yourself now, like, what is your quality of life really going to look like when you finally hang up your belt? Like, I feel bad to see people who get to the end, and our lifespan or life expectancy is not very good. So even little things like your annual exams, and doing the really not fun exams when you're a man or when you're a woman as you age, you need to do those things for preventative medicine. And to live that full long life that we want to, that we worked really hard for. I don't want to live to 100, but I'd like my quality of life to be at least good till 80, maybe beyond. As long as my quality of life is good, I don't care how old I am. It's just a number.
Right.
But I think a lot of times we're in more control of that than people realize.
100%. And I know if someone's listening to it, they can't see like me just shaking my head the whole time, but I'm like, yes, yes, everything you're saying. And I feel like I'm going to steal that, first of all. People need the best of you, not the rest of you. I've never heard that. I love that so much. And I think that right now we're seeing such an interesting shift. You have the older generation that never had resources ever.
Mhm.
And so you kind of touched on this before about, prior leadership telling you don't take time off and don't take care of yourself in certain ways. And we know that it used to be that mentality of like, show up, shut up. And
Mhm.
now we have this existing because we know that wellness has progressed so much in this profession over the last 10 years.
Mhm.
And now we have leaders like yourself who are prioritizing it, not just for themselves, but for everyone else within their agency. And we know that everyone under you is going to become leadership, over time. And so by creating that culture and that standard of wellness now, we're only going to see that progress further, and being able to have that long, successful retirement, I think is everyone's ultimate goal. Like, obviously, everyone's going to have different whys for themselves, but I think that when you look at retirement age and, the statistics are what, 4 years? Is the life expectancy 4 to 7 years?
That's gone up a little bit from when I started. I think it was 2 to 3. So
Yeah,
it has increased, but that's still nothing. Like
right.
that's not even 60 for some people.
Yep.
And that's just so young and so different from the rest of the population. It's sad.
Yep, 100%. And I love that you're prioritizing it for yourself so that you can give the best of yourself for your agency and set that example for future generations to come so that we can prolong that age even more. I mean, I want to see you at 100.
We'll
80,
see.
80 doesn't seem
We'll
long
see.
enough. I think 100 is good. We'll stick with that. So, we know that physical wellness impacts mental wellness. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this and how you think that, by prioritizing your physical wellness, how that has impacted your mental health, because we know that this line of work is so challenging, not just physically, but mentally, and the stress that you're under and the things that you see and the people that you encounter and the shift work and all of, the stressors on the job. And how do you feel like your discipline and your wellness has helped to, promote that positive mental health for yourself?
So I think everybody can agree that after a really good workout, you feel better. Going into it, you're like, oh, I really don't want to do this. And those are often the ones that you need the most. And then afterward, you feel so great that you did. Endorphins make you happy. And so for me, if I don't work out, I feel it. And the opposite is true. If I do, especially after having a really rough day, I mean, there's times even though I work out in the morning, I may do a little workout when I get home or go for a run and just leave it out on the pavement, especially if it's been a really challenging week. Or, I do a fun activity too. And so I think that exercise, they go hand in hand with mental health. And so, and, if you feel better on the inside, you're going to live better on the outside. How you interact with people, if you're, happy within versus if you're not feeling good, you're going to be grumpy or not approachable, or your decision making might be a little cloudy. So, I mean, it impacts everything, but more importantly, apart from the job, like you have a home to go home to. So if you're not your best self there, you could get to the end of retirement and you might not have what you used to have in that house. Our divorce rate is extremely high.
Yeah.
And I think, a lot of that shift work too, cops marry cops. It's really hard. I mean, that was my first divorce. Or my only divorce. I'm married now again, but he's not a cop. And so sometimes, two type A personalities might not be good. But either way, married, whatever your family situation is like, just you have to prioritize yourself for your best self at work, but also for your home life because your career is going to end. You're going to leave it at some point. And so you still want something to come home to at the end of it too. And so it's a priority for both on and off duty, how you're taking care of yourself physically, but also mentally too. Because this job is hard and it's traumatic and it's cumulative and it's hard to not take it home too. And you just want to talk to your partner about your day and, vent a little bit about stuff going on. But our stuff that we talk about is not normal. And some of the things that we see and hear and deal with are, obviously the worst of society that not everybody can handle. And if they could, they would do this job, but they don't because they can't. And
Right.
so I try not to expose my husband to as many things as possible because he didn't sign up for that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what we have counseling services for. So yeah, you have to prioritize yourself for both reasons, but exercise, you feel so much better after. I just can't imagine you don't want to see a Kelly that doesn't work out in a day because it's not going to be pretty. I still have my rest days, but those are intentional rest days.
Right.
Not, I just don't feel like working out, so I'm not going to today. I don't have those days. I can't have those days.
Yeah. And and to your point, and I would love to know, so you kind of mentioned taking care of yourself mentally. And I know that working out is a big part of your life and eating clean is a big part of your life. Are there any other resources that you've been exposed to or that you've utilized throughout your career from a mental perspective that has been really useful that you would recommend to others to at least try something that's been impactful for your mental health?
Definitely. So, another shift that we've seen in our culture, thankfully, is talking about mental health.
Hmm.
It was pretty taboo before, still a little challenging for people to talk about in our profession because it's that gray area. People have this fear of their gun being taken away and they're not going to be able to perform this job anymore. Um, I think statistically we lose more officers now by suicide than anything else. I've lost two close people to me by suicide. One, the anniversary is coming up, and so it's always very triggering. What I've seen in my agency and a lot of agencies is peer support teams, but also counseling services. And so we have both here at my agency. They're pretty common now, thankfully. And so it was actually this time last year was the first time we had just gotten counseling services for a few months. And so it was the first time that I thought, okay, I'll do an annual wellness check-in. That's part of our package deal where those are free. And then each officer has 6 free sessions every single year that's covered by the agency. And then if more is needed, the therapist recommends it, the chief can approve more type thing. And so it's completely confidential. We just get the bill. Each employee is just a number and that's it. We have no idea who it is. We just pay it and we're happy that people are taking up on the services. And so one of the reasons I did it was I was curious to see what the process was like, especially if somebody had asked me about it, I could speak to it. But it was also beneficial to me over last year because it ended up leading to EMDR therapy. And so I have done a lot of therapy over the years to heal childhood traumas. I had heard of EMDR before and thought it was interesting, but it was always like advertised as for vets, for veterans, for anyone suffering from PTSD. And so it was still pretty new. And I actually remember, because my background is in psychology. And so it went back a long time, but the therapist had recommended or asked me if I'd be willing to do EMDR because I had some undealt with trauma, mostly from childhood, actually, that kind of related to an on the job, which one of them was a police suicide. That was somebody that I'd actually been in a relationship with. And so I learned very quickly, or I was reminded very quickly, how intertwined our brains are and how everything is so connected. And so I had probably about 3 or 4 sessions of EMDR that I was able to take a pretty couple like traumatic memories, one from my childhood and one from the job, that I was able to completely unravel and change the memory of it. It's almost like the best way I could describe it is creating almost like a false memory from an actual memory,
Mm.
um, changing it from a negative to a positive. So the actual memory, would be very triggering emotionally. And you're able to go through the EMDR process and make it into something that's positive, something that you tell yourself that completely. It's never going to like change it or remove it from your memory, but it's not, the whole point is so it doesn't trigger you
Right.
anymore. It doesn't trigger that emotional response. And so, um, it's made things that happened to me that I'm able to actually talk about it now and not just turn into a complete disaster. That's huge, to like we internalize so many things. A lot of us do in general, but especially police officers, we don't like to talk about things that hurt us because we're not allowed to hurt. We're supposed to
Right.
save everybody else. And so at least that's what the stigma was before. I think we're getting better about that. But I have no problem telling people about my experience. I encourage people like go to the counseling services. I do whatever you have to do. It's available. We pay for it. It's completely confidential. If you're not ready for that, we have peer support, and we have a great peer support team that we've put together here that everybody was selected by their peers to be on that team. It was not an admin decision. It was a group decision by everybody else. And that's how it should be because you want to have approachable people that you can trust and confide in,
Mm.
that you're just like, hey, right now I just need to talk to somebody. And then, peer support, they're like, hey, this might be a little too much for me. I think you need to go see a counselor. And we have that available now too. And so I think, moving forward, it's still going to take time. I love signing off that bill, and getting one and be like, yes, we have another number. Like there's more now. I'm always going to be the same number, but I love that it increases slowly but surely. And with our police foundation, we've actually been able to incentivize people by at least doing an annual wellness check-in. They'll get $100 gift card if they do it.
Nice.
Um, it's kind of like, oh, should we have to incentivize it? But at this point, it's like we just want people to know how easy and accessible it is, and for people to like go and see what it's about, and for them to just hear somebody else who they don't know give their, honest advice of, hey, you should probably come back and see me, or hey, maybe work on these things and I'll see you again next year.
Hmm.
Um, Certainly after a traumatic event, um, people I think are hopefully more likely to take counseling, take them up on counseling services. But we also have like a response team come too for a major incident like that will come, and it's usually mandatory for the department to at least sit there. They don't have to say anything, but at least sit there. So we've had that a couple of times as well. So yeah, I think just the fact that in, almost 2025, here we are, we've come a long way with talking about mental health and giving agencies the ability to have access to those services that you would never even think to have access to. Um, we still have a long ways to go, in my opinion, but I am not shy about sharing my experience, and I hope that as this generation rises into leadership positions, that it will continue so that it becomes, everyday conversation, just like it is about, hey, you should probably not eat that double double right now. Like,
Right.
and look out for each other because they go hand in hand.
Yeah, and I love, and this is a common thread that I've heard over the years is just start talking about it.
Yes.
Like just start there. Make that normal.
Mhm.
Because I think that still we have like this locker room talk that's like, I would never do that. And like, it's very still not everywhere. Obviously, every agency is going to be different. But there's this locker room talk of like, I would never do that. But then behind closed doors, people are seeking, help and resources. And so just talking about it and changing that perception and that conversation will again lead to that shift over time. So I love that little piece of like, just start talking about it. Like talk about your experiences
Yeah.
and then it'll make it normal. Okay, so I have one last question for you. It's a two-part question though.
Okay.
Okay. If you If there's someone in leadership who is looking to build a wellness program for their employees, they don't know where to start, they don't know what to do. What advice would you give if there was one thing that you're like, definitely do this first? And then the second part of that is if someone is new in their career, what is one piece of wellness advice that you would give them that maybe you wish you would have known earlier in your career, or a resource that you wish you would have had earlier in your career? So one from a leadership, like organizational perspective, and then one from an individual perspective. Your words of wisdom.
Okay. So for the first question, I'm a data person, and whenever I look to do anything new, I find out, well, what has everybody else done?
Mhm.
And what everybody else has done may not work for your agency. Small is not going to work for big, and vice versa, usually. And so if you do enough research and gather enough to say, okay, this agency did this and it worked well, reach out to the people in those agencies. With our networking, enough of us know each other that we could be connected with somebody to find out, what's good, what's bad, what you would do differently. So that's how I would do it, starting something brand new, is get all my facts together. What has everybody else done? And then I kind of piecemeal it together of, I like this component of it for us. I think this would work. I don't think this would work. And that's kind of how I put my proposals together. And then I pitch it to my bosses through the rest of the chain, but also to discussion, down to the sergeants, and, get their input too, because I'm just one opinion, one person. And so usually in that research process, I'm like, what do you think about this? And so that's kind of what I do. I research what everybody else has done. You don't need to reinvent the wheel most times. It's a lot easier that way. And I think there's enough wellness programs out there that people can pick and choose and copy and paste
Right.
enough of. But I think that for us, what I liked that we did is we started small and with free. Peer support is pretty much free. It was simple as, you have a policy and you put together a team that everybody else votes for. You put somebody in charge of that, and then they just start training. And
Hmm.
so that was really easy to implement, and then to build from there. I think so. If you start small and then build it and grow it, it doesn't get out of hand. And then you can, make adjustments where you need to as things begin to evolve with your peer support team. And, we had to figure out some questions about, well, if they're called, are they getting paid overtime? Is it on their own time? And so there's things that you need to figure out as you go, and you need to have conversations. So if you start small, it's a lot easier to make those adjustments versus like, here's your big fish and you're going to eat it all at once at the same
Right.
table. It gets a little complex. It might be easier to do from a large agency perspective, but because we're small and we do so many things, it's easier to manage a little bit at a time and build from there, kind of like my habits.
Yep.
That would be my best advice. Um, Second question. It's very similar to what advice was given to me early on. So there's something wrong with us in this profession, that we run toward bullets and, we see blood and guts and we think that's cool. That's just kind of our personality. We're built different.
Mhm.
Early on, you're like, oh, I did this, or, this shooting or this dead body. And, working in records and having access to the reports and seeing pictures and things like that. You just think it's so cool. It's new, it's different. This is what you got into policing for. That's all cumulative. And so the more you expose yourself to those pictures, those videos, those calls, the more it accumulates to you, and it builds. And we think we're tough and we think we can handle it. And, we're Teflon, nothing's going to break us, but that's not true. We're human. And I will tell you, after many years of this, I will avoid seeing pictures of stuff, or, watching videos that I don't necessarily have to, for overexposure. And so I would be 100% mindful of not overexposing yourself to traumatic events. So I'd say that from very early on. Don't go to that call unless you absolutely have to. Obviously, if it's a team response, do that,
Mhm.
officer safety, number one. But don't be that guy or girl who's like, well, I'm just going to cruise on by because I want to see it.
Right.
Don't. If you don't need to be there, don't. If you don't need to see it, don't. The other thing that I would highly recommend is reading the book Emotional Survival. I have several copies of it. I read it every few years. In 2019, I had a lot of life events happen. I read it twice. That is a great book to have early on in your career. Give it to your spouse to read as well. It reminds you not to fall into those bad traps. This so many people look at this profession and they think they're going to die in the line of duty is their biggest um, potential issue. Very real consequence. People die in the line of duty every year, every day, and it's tragic. But I think our biggest killer is our mental health. We've talked about it already that suicide is so high. This career changes you. It changes your brain. It changes how you think. It changes how you look at the world. You need to protect that at all costs. And so the best way that I would recommend doing that is not overexpose yourself and read that book. It's an easy read, it's quick. Dr. Gil Martin is very wise beyond his years. He knows us really well. The chair analogy is perfect for a profession. Anyone who's read the book would understand. But I give it out to, and I know we have a chaplain who gives that book out to new people here. And I would it's really that simple. Read the book, do what the book says. Um, don't be afraid to ask for help, just like I did when I was 10. There's so much strength in being vulnerable, and people look at it as a weakness. And I think Brene Brown said it best, that vulnerability is strength. And as leaders, you have to be vulnerable. And it's really just that simple. And so I think that if you do what you encourage others to do, you will be successful. If you don't do it, you're not going to be able to encourage others to do it. And as a leader, if you're not thinking about the future, your own future, your agency's future, and those behind you, then you're not leading. So I think just it really is that simple, is protect your mental health more than anything else, I think, and then everything else will follow. This profession is hard, and there's a reason why we have a shortage of people doing it. And I hope that changes as well, especially as we have more conversations like these where people see us for who we are. We're just normal human beings who come from very traumatic backgrounds, and we figure it out as we go, and we do the best that we can, and we just look out for each other, just like we would anyone else.
Wow, beautifully said. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time and you being here. And I'm like almost tearing up a little bit. I'm just very inspired by you. So thank you so much
So
for your words of advice and your time and your leadership and your attention to wellness and, your not just your wellness, but your agency's wellness. I really appreciate you and your time. Thank you so much for being here.
thank you for having me. It's been a real honor. I appreciate you and your time as well, and that you're putting this out there, and that you're having these conversations, not just with me, but with a lot of other people. I wish I would have had this advice, just like your podcast says. I wish I would have had this advice, 20 years ago. It would have been maybe a little easier for me at times, but I appreciate you and everything that you're doing for people like me. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.